Okay, so today we're going to talk about solving linear inequalities. The first thing we need to talk about is what an inequality is. An inequality is when you have these symbols, and we have already talked about these very briefly, but remember this is greater than, and this is greater than or equal to, and then you have less than and less than or equal to. So we're going to be solving equations with these and graphing them on a number line. So let's actually talk about how to graph inequalities on a number line. When you are using the greater than or less than symbols, when you graph on a number line, you use a parentheses. When you have the equal part to it, you graph with a bracket. That doesn't go in the middle. So if I wanted to graph x is greater than -1 on a number line, what this means is x can be anything bigger than -1. Now, in inequalities, you always want to have your variable on the left side because it just makes things smoother in the long run. And I'll explain to that in just a minute. But here's my number line. I'm going to have -3, -2, -1, 0. So I would put a parentheses above the -1. And what is everything bigger than -1? It goes this direction. Now, as long as your variable is on this side, this arrow tells you which direction to go. So if I had x is less than or equal to 4, what are numbers less than or equal to 4? 3, 2, 1. I was plotting these on a number line. I would have a bracket on the -4, and since I'm going this direction, my bracket would be here going this direction. Now, a bracket means it includes the number 4, but the parentheses would mean it doesn't include it. So let's take a look at an actual number line, and I want to see if we can figure out what its graph is. So I want it to be here, going this way. So the easiest way to do that is, remember, you always have x first. Now, is it a less than or greater than, or less than and equal to, greater than or equal to? Since it's the bracket, it's going to be this or this. Now, which way is my arrow going? That way. So that means it's got to be this one. And where did it end up at? 2. And this is saying x is less than or equal to 2. So are these the numbers less than or equal to 2? Yes. So let's look at solving equations. You solve equations for the most part exactly the same. There's only one difference, and we're going to talk about that at the very end. So I would add 4 to both sides. X, this doesn't change. What's a -10 plus 4? -6. And remember, use your calculator. So when I graph this on a number line, my -6 is here. It would look like this, going this direction. Now, we have something that's called interval notation. Now, with interval notation, you have parentheses and you have brackets and you have infinity. If your number has an infinity with it, it's always going to have a parentheses. Okay? And let me explain to you what I'm talking about. Let's say that I had x is less than or equal to -4. If I plotted this on a number line, I would have a bracket here going this way. Interval notation is writing this in a really short form. Now, what am I happening here? Am I going towards a positive infinity or a negative infinity? So this is going to negative infinity. And whenever I have an infinity, I use this symbol. So this right here in interval notation would be a parentheses, negative infinity, comma, where does it stop at? -4. Is that a bracket or a parentheses? It's a bracket. That's interval notation. Your parentheses are either going to be a negative or positive depending upon the direction you're going, and will always be a parentheses. If this is a bracket, this is a bracket. If this would have been a parentheses, it would have been a parentheses. So up here for this one, my interval notation would be bracket at -6. I'm going to the positive infinity because I'm going to the right, which means I then have that symbol. All right, let's try an equation. Remember, you always want your variables on the left. As different than in equations, we always want our variables on the left. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. X plus 3 is greater than or equal to 7. Subtract 3 from both sides. X is greater than or equal to 4. So now that's my answer. A graph of this would be a bracket on 4 going towards the positive direction. So this is to positive infinity. So then I just rewrite this in interval notation would be 4 comma infinity parentheses. Let's take a look at this one. Now there is a rule about dividing with negative numbers, but it only applies if you're ending up with this number being negative. If your variable isn't a negative number, you don't have to worry about this. Right now, my goal to solve this would be divide both sides by 4. X would be greater than or equal to -5. On a number line, bracket going this direction. So remember, just copy that down. I don't know why I keep wanting to make that an E. -5, comma, positive infinity. Even though this is a negative number, and this is a negative number, and this is a negative number, we're going towards the positive side. So that's why it looks like that. Now, let's talk about when that is a negative number. Let's take a look at an example of that problem we just did. We had x is greater than or equal to -5, and our equation was 4x is greater than or equal to -20. So give me a number that's greater than -5. Let's say 7. So I'm going to plug in 7 for x and get 28. Is 28 greater than or equal to negative 20? Yeah. So that's a true statement. But let me show you what happens when I have a negative with my variable. I'm going to divide both sides by -5, and if I do it exactly like I did the other one, I get x is less than -5. So looking back at my equation, what's a number less than -5? -8. So let's plug in -8. -5 times -8 is 40. Is 40 less than 25? It's not. Because when you divide two numbers by a negative, you always get a positive answer. So the rule now is whenever you are dividing both sides of an inequality, you do the exact same thing. You divide both sides by -5, but you flip your inequality to its opposite. So now I have x is greater than -5. What's a number bigger than -5? Let's say 0. If I plugged in 0 here, I'd get 0 is less than 25, and that's a true statement. So remember, anytime you divide both sides by a negative number, you flip the inequality symbol. All right, one more question. -2x minus 8 is less than 4. Solve graph interval notation. I'm going to add 8 to both sides. -2x is less than 12. Divide both sides by -2. Flip your inequality, and my answer is x is greater than -6. Graphing this on a number line, here's -6. I would have a parentheses on -6 going to the positive infinity sign way. So interval notation would be -6 infinity.